Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever wondered why some international events, unfold the way they do?
Or why some global issues seem just so incredibly complex?
Exactly. It often comes down to understanding the very foundations of how the world is organized politically.
Right.
Today we're taking a deep dive into the fascinating and sometimes, perplexing world of global politics. We'll explore how this term world politics actually signals a pretty fundamental shift from the older idea of international politics.
And how different ways of thinking, different lenses, help us make sense of this ever-evolving landscape.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? How much has changed.
Connecting some historical events to contemporary challenges.
Yes, and maybe sparking some aha moments about why things are the way they are.
Our mission today really is to give you a shortcut to being well-informed. We're extracting the most important nuggets from, a stack of serious sources.
Including core texts on the globalization of world politics.
So get ready for some surprising facts and insights that will hopefully help you connect the dots.
Let's do it.
So let's kick things off with that fundamental shift in how we even talk about global interactions. For so long, it was international politics, right?
Focused purely on relations between states.
Seeing them as the main players operating within clear territorial boundaries, but now it's world politics. What's the core difference there? Why the change?
That's a great question because it's definitely not just semantics. World politics acknowledges a transformed scale of political life. Meaning decisions and actions in one place can profoundly affect communities far, far away. It's what some call the geocentric nature of world politics.
Geocentric, okay.
Yeah, power isn't just confined to states anymore. It's diffused, spread across a much broader system.
Including things like international agencies.
International agencies, yeah, a whole host of non-state actors, civil society organizations. The list goes on.
Like that Toronto airport example from our sources. That's kind of wild, right?
It is.
That even national borders aren't always perfectly lining up with physical territory anymore. A U.S. border facility inside Canada.
Exactly. It shows how the concept isn't necessarily weakening, but it's definitely becoming more complex, more permeable in new ways.
So it highlights how political issues consistently escape that artificial foreign-domestic divide we used to rely on.
Precisely. In the 21st century, geopolitics is definitely interpolar.
Interpolar.
Meaning a system where you have multiple, highly interconnected great powers shaping things, rather than just, say, two superpowers or one dominant force.
Right, not just bipolar or unipolar.
Exactly. And to really grasp this current order, you kind of have to look at the historical roots.
Which brings us to the rise of the West.
And it's crucial to understand, this wasn't just some natural evolution. It was fundamentally based on imperialism.
Okay.
European power was really premised on deep inequalities. Think about the restructuring of economies.
How so?
Into a primary producing periphery and a secondary producing core, often through Western-imposed price and production systems that, frankly, eroded local practices.
And the scale of this. The sources mention Britain conquering, 100,000 square miles a year on average between 1815 and 1865?
Yeah, an incredible rate of expansion. It really drove this great divergence.
This massive historical shift where the West sort of outpaced other global powers beyond the obvious, like imperialism. What else was driving that divergence?
Well, liberal constitutions in the West certainly played a part. They helped restrict domestic conflict, creating more stability internally.
Okay, that makes sense.
But here's something maybe less obvious, even counterintuitive. The sheer frequency of European interstate wars.
Wars help.
In a way, yes. Nearly 75% of the years between 1494 and 1975 saw European powers fighting each other. This constant competition, while devastating, also spurred innovation.
Military innovation. State building.
Both. Plus, you add in the scientific advances from the European Enlightenment, certain geographical advantages, and, of course, the rise of capitalism, enabling sustained investment.
It's fascinating how conflict can be a catalyst like that. And then the 19th century really
Kicked things into high gear with technology. Railways, for instance.
Well, absolutely. Railways were revolutionary. They dramatically lowered trade costs.
How dramatic?
Well, in the U.S., late 19th...
thought of that connection.
So railways and steamships together became the backbone of this new global transportation system. And that underpinned the division of labor we talked about.
The industrial core and the commodity-producing periphery.
Exactly.
And this era also saw that concept of the standard of civilization, which, looking back, is pretty jarring.
Deeply problematic, yes. It was used to justify Western interactions, often coercive ones, with other peoples.
Through things like unequal treaties, protectorates, formal colonization, like India after the 1857 revolt.
Right. And the strange twist was that becoming civilized in the eyes of the West often meant becoming an imperial power yourself.
Like Japan invading Taiwan in 1874 and then annexing Korea in 1910, it's like they had to adopt the oppressor's tactics to be accepted.
That was the brutal logic of the time, yes. Power recognized power.
Okay, fast forward to the 20th century. Imperialism starts to unravel, especially after 1945.
It does, yeah. There's a big shift towards national self-determination. The Cold War complicated things, of course, influencing decolonization in various ways.
Both speeding it up and slowing it down sometimes.
Exactly. And you see these sort of final gasps of European imperialism. The Suez Crisis in 1956 is a prime example.
Where the U.S. stepped in.
Yes, U.S. economic pressure essentially forced Britain to back down. It shows the old colonial powers were now constrained by these new superpower dynamics.
Okay, so that sets the historical stage. Now here's where it gets, as you said, really interesting. To make sense of all this complexity, we need different ways of looking at it, different theoretical lenses.
Exactly. And they offer quite different explanations for why things happen.
Let's start with a big one, realism. Its core idea seems to be this endless
Universal moral principles to see behavior.
So thinkers like Machiavelli.
Machiavelli, yeah, emphasizing prudence and political necessity, sometimes over traditional morality for leaders, and Hobbes with his ideas about the state of nature, fear, the lust for power. Realists often draw parallels to the international scene.
And this leads to the dual moral standard.
Right, the idea that there's one set of ethics for citizens within a state, where the state provides order, but a different, often harsher reality applies to states in their external relations. For realists, the state itself is the ultimate moral force domestically, but internationally. It's a self-help system.
Okay, but what if peace isn't just, a temporary absence of war, but something we can actually build? That's more the liberal internationalism view, right?
Exactly. It stands in pretty stark contrast to realism. Liberals believe peace is a condition that can be constructed.
Like Woodrow Wilson pushing for the League of Nations after World War I.
A classic example.
Yeah.
And the UN, formed later, aimed to correct some of the League's perceived flaws, like its lack of binding resolutions, or the fact the U.S. never even joined.
So what's the optimistic but maybe still plausible hope for liberalism in world affairs?
Well, a key idea is the democratic peace thesis,
Which says
that liberal states tend not to fight wars with each other. There's debate about why, but the correlation seems strong.
interesting.
And then there's the idea of collective security, embodied by the UN Security Council, the idea that states act together against aggression.
Does that ever actually work, though, with the veto and all?
It's tough, requires great power consensus. But the UN response to Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in 1990 is often cited as an example where post-Cold War collective security was realized, at least for a moment.
Okay. Now, shifting gears, quite dramatically, Marxist theories. For them, it's not about states or anarchy, it's about economics.
Fundamentally, yes. They see world politics playing out within a highly unequal world capitalist economy.
And the main actors aren't states, but
Classes,
Yeah.
social classes. For Marxists, the behavior of states and other actors is ultimately driven by underlying class forces and the dynamics of capital accumulation.
so how does this help explain global inequality?
Through concepts like world systems theory. This divides the world into a core, a semi-periphery, and a periphery.
And the idea is that wealth flows from the periphery to the core.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Wealth is systematically drained, perpetuating inequality. It's a structural argument about how capitalism operates globally.
And didn't Wallerstein have a pretty controversial take on the Cold War's end?
He did. He argued it wasn't the triumph of liberalism, but maybe signaled the beginning of the end phase for the current capitalist world system, A time of crisis, yes, but also potentially an opportunity for a more equitable system to emerge. It challenges the whole narrative.
Wow. Okay. That's a very different perspective. What about the constructivism? This one focuses more on ideas, right? Human consciousness.
That's right. Constructivism emphasizes the role of shared ideas, knowledge, symbols, language, rules in shaping international life. It's about how we understand the world, not just the material distribution of power.
So it's less about states and armies, more about norms and beliefs.
Exactly. It argues that the social world is fundamentally different from the material world. Interests aren't just given. They're shaped by identities and shared understandings.
How does focusing on these social ideas help explain real-world changes that maybe realism or liberalism miss?
Well, constructivism is particularly good at explaining change that isn't just about power shifts or economic logic. Take the responsibility to protect norm, R2P.
R2P, right.
This idea didn't just spring out of nowhere. It emerged from shared horror and debate following tragedies like the Rwandan genocide.
And the core idea is?
That states have a primary responsibility to protect their own populations from mass atrocities. But if they fail to do so, the international community has a responsibility to step in. This norm evolved through persuasion, advocacy, and changing understandings of sovereignty.
It wasn't always accepted.
Not at all. It shows how ideas and norms can reshape state interests and international practice over time.
Okay, next up. Feminist theories. These came about because other theories just weren't talking about women or gender, right?
Pretty much. They emerged from a deep dissatisfaction with the exclusion of women and gender perspectives in mainstream international relations.
So what's one of the key insights feminist theories brought to the table? What blind spot did they uncover?
A major one was showing how core concepts like the state, security, and the military were historically constructed in deeply gendered ways.
Gendered how?
Well, linking ideas about masculinity to soldiering and military prowess, for example, making security seem inherently masculine. Feminist scholars showed how this wasn't natural, but constructed.
And Megan McKenzie's research, mentioned in the sources, suggests women's exclusion from combat isn't just practical, but reinforces myths about male prowess.
Exactly. It's maintained by myths and stereotypes, not just objective capability assessments. It's about understanding how gender shapes the institutions and practices of world politics.
And this critical work has had real-world impact, like the Women, Peace and Security, or WPS agenda at the UN since 2000.
Absolutely. There's a growing international commitment, at least on paper, to address gender inequalities in conflict and peace building.
Okay. Then we have post-colonial and decolonial approaches. These seem focused on critiquing Eurocentrism.
That's central, yes. They argue forcefully that the effects of colonialism are definitely not formally past. They continue to shape the present in profound ways.
How so?
They highlight how even supposedly universal Western ideals, like the rights of man, were often imposed or appropriated during colonialism. But crucially, they also point to how colonized peoples cultivated alternative ways of knowing and resisting things like voodoo or Hindu asceticism weren't just cultural practices, but also political stances.
Resisting the dominant narrative.
Exactly. Challenging the idea of a single linear path to modernity or development dictated by the West.
And this connects to the third world identity that emerged in the mid-20th century. Conferences like Bandung and Havana.
Yes, those were key moments where newly independent states came together to forge a common identity and agenda, often explicitly challenging the existing world order.
And the UN, ironically, became a space for this, even though it was initially designed by the dominant powers.
Right. It became an important forum for collaboration and pushing back, leading to things like the establishment of UNCTAD, the UN Conference on Trade and Development in 1964, specifically to address developing world concerns.
So even within the system, challenges emerged. Finally, post-structuralism. Sounds challenging. Critical of fixed ideas.
It is challenging in a good way. Post-structuralism is skeptical of taking concepts like the state or anarchy as fixed natural entities. Instead, it focuses intensely on language.
Language. How does language construct the world in international politics?
It argues that the way we talk about things literally shapes the reality we perceive and act upon. The words we choose aren't neutral descriptors. They are powerful tools.
Can you give an example?
The sources use a great one, describing mass violence as genocide versus, say, tribal warfare.
How does that change things?
Calling it genocide carries immense moral weight. It puts moral pressure on the international community to do something, as the source says. Tribal warfare sounds almost distant, maybe inevitable, less urgent. The label itself shapes the response. So epistemology, how we claim to know things. It argues there's no objective yardstick
To define threats or enemies. These things are constructed through discourse.
Making us really question the taken-for-granted assumptions.
Precisely.
Okay, so we have all these lenses. How do they help us understand the world?
global financial system.
It really brought home the systemic risk.
It did. And what's fascinating is the ripple effect beyond finance. That crisis is seen as having really fueled the resurgence of nationalist populism.
Leading to widespread public disenchantment.
Yeah, a sense that the system wasn't working for everyone, that globalization benefited elites, but left many behind.
And then you get the two shocks of 2016, the Brexit vote in the UK and Trump's election in the US.
Both seen as signifying a powerful backlash against both globalization itself and the liberal international order that had promoted it.
So did globalization actually retreat after all that, or did it just morph?
That's the big debate.
Yeah.
Because despite those shocks, globalization seems much more embedded and resilient than maybe people thought.
How so?
Well, we're arguably in a fourth wave now, driven by digital technologies. And you have new economic powerhouses like China and India reshaping it.
Right. China accounting for, what, half of world trade now? And the whole Belt and Road Initiative?
Yeah, exactly. It suggests maybe a more multipolar globalization, perhaps with competing models,
Right.
rather than just a retreat.
Which brings us neatly to rising powers, like the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They're clearly becoming more influential.
Undeniably, they're creating their own institutions, like the new development bank.
Yeah.
They're demanding a bigger voice.
But are they just looking for more power within the existing system, or do they want to change the rules of the game?
That's a key question. And the sources suggest it's not always just about straightforward hard power calculations, military or economic size.
What else is involved?
Foreign policy ideas shaped by history, feelings of past humiliation, or a sense that they haven't been granted the status or social recognition they feel they deserve. It's about identity and respect, too.
So they might challenge norms, not just seek power.
Potentially, yes. Seeking a reordering, not just a bigger slice of the pie.
Okay, let's talk global security challenges. You mentioned this modern security paradox.
Right. The idea that the rules-based Western liberal order, while largely maintaining peace since World War II, is increasingly challenged.
Challenge for being biased, serving mainly Western interests.
That's the criticism, yes. And you hear figures like the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres worrying about lawlessness becoming the new normal, a sense that the rules are fraying.
Within that, what's a major ongoing threat?
Weapons of mass destruction, WMDs, remain a huge concern, particularly nuclear weapons.
We rely on nuclear deterrence, right? Mutually assured destruction.
Largely, yes. It's a terrifying balance. And the main tool to manage this is the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT.
Which is a kind of bargain.
Exactly. Built on
Three pillars. Non-nuclear states promise not to acquire nukes, nuclear states promise to work toward disarmament, and everyone gets access to peaceful nuclear energy.
But it's under strain.
Constantly.
Globalization has boosted their technical capabilities enormously.
In what way?
Faster communication, easier travel, access to information and technology. Think about Al-Qaeda's adaptability, or the Islamic State's incredibly effective online propaganda machine. Globalization empowers these networks.
Makes them harder to track and counter.
Definitely, they can be globally dispersed but locally active.
Okay, finally, let's touch on human rights and intervention. We have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the UDHR.
And its two main covenants, the ICCPR on civil and political rights,
And ICESCR on economic, social, and cultural rights. Together, they're meant to be a comprehensive statement of universal, indivisible rights.
Sounds good on paper.
authorizing force against a functioning state, ostensibly to prevent atrocities.
But surely there are strong arguments against intervention.
Oh, absolutely. Critics raise serious concerns.
Right.
That it's vulnerable to abuse powerful states using it as a pretext. That states apply it selectively, ignoring abuses by allies. That it can undermine international order or impose the cultural preferences of the powerful.
Examples like the burqa ban in France showing tensions even within liberal states.
Precisely. Or the ongoing struggles for LGBTQ rights in places like Uganda, highlighting where international human rights norms clash with national laws and deeply held cultural views. It shows the limits.
So wrapping this all up, it's clear these forces shaping global politics are super dynamic. There's no single answer, lots of disagreement.
Definitely. The future isn't set in stone. A huge ongoing debate is about the future of globalization itself.
Will those nationalist impulses we talked about ultimately win out over internationalism?
Or will the sheer power of global finance and multinational corporations kind of maintain the status quo, even with all the turbulence? Remember, after the 2008 crisis, many expected big reforms in finance.
But they didn't really materialize on the scale predicted.
Largely no. Global capital proved incredibly resilient. So which force is stronger long-term? It's an open question.
And it seems tied to inequality, doesn't it? Even the IMF is warning against austerity now, saying you need to address inequality for growth.
That connection is crucial. A more equitable form of globalization might be the only truly sustainable one.
Yeah.
So if you connect all this back to the bigger picture, that journey we talked about from international
To world politics.
Sure.
It's not just words.
It reflects a real change.
A fundamentally more integrated, more complex reality. Understanding the history, the different theories or lenses.
To modern disputes over islands like Dewey and Kaku.
You've heard how ideas like civilizing missions shaped the past, and how debates over labels like genocide versus tribal warfare still shape our present and future responses.
The power of language.
Yeah. So for you listening, what really stands out from this deep dive? What forces do you think truly move the needle in world politics today?
And maybe thinking about how your own actions, even small ones, might play a part in what comes next.
Food for thought. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. We hope this exploration leaves you not just well-informed, but also really curious to learn even more.